We are here at the Marion Hotel with thanks to Land Rover, and as you can see, Brian O'Driscoll and Jamie Heaslip are with me. Lads, what's this week like in Ireland camp after a bit of a destruction on Saturday afternoon?
I'd say sheepish. Hopefully not too quiet, because you got to get over the disappointments of it. But I'd say it's a combination of management driving it, but also the senior players trying to drive it as well. It's not all about hand holding. They've got to try and sort out the problems, some of the issues they had themselves. So these are tough weeks. They are off the back of a drubbing, particularly when confidence is taking a bit of a dent. It's hard, but you just don't look too far ahead. And we talk about taking things game by game. This is just session by session, and just try and correct the things that went wrong and make sure that you don't leave any stone unturned. That's the thing. That it was a game at the weekend that didn't look like it had the detail that we associate with Joe Schmidt teams and the accuracy that we associate. So if you sort those two things out and throw some intent in with that, I think straight away you're going to improve by 40%.
Yeah, that is the positive, Jamie, isn't it? That the things were such glaring differences from Ireland at their peak that they're surely easier fixes than, say, minute improvements.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it, if you look at the game in context in terms of what it is, it's a warm-up game for these guys. It's guys get match fit and kind of get working together again. And despite all the fitness that they've done, I always found you need the guts of 2 games to get up to match speed. I think you saw a lot of guys who weren't up to match speed, who are kind of chasing the game, almost looking at the game at times. That's to be expected. But kind of to dovetail on Brian's point, what wasn't expected was the amount of real basic errors that we're just not used to seeing. Execution off the set piece, for example. Ireland are so dependent on the set piece to kind of get into the game that that kind of surprised me. I'd be really interested to see what changes he makes to the squad this week in terms of giving players opportunity, because it's the last chance for a lot of guys to show their hand to get into that World Cup squad. But even with those changes, I would like to see a lot of progression in how they're playing and the execution of set piece and the detail around that.
Well, let's get into that then. Let's talk about the personnel changes that you expect. We might start with you, Jamie. What changes do you expect, assuming Schmidt wants to win this Saturday, which I presume he does?
Well, I think every time Ireland go out and play, they want to win. The outcome probably isn't as important as opposed to the way they're playing. But for me, look, I've been beating the drum about Jack Conan, and I think he's been the informed number 8 for probably since I was playing. Even when I was playing, I thought he was always pushing me, challenging me, and I think he's really grown into his own. And I would like to see Jack start. I think he brings a lot of variety to the game.
Do you think there might be something at training where he hasn't quite delivered? And we talk about games being the litmus test, but they're not really. They're just one showing, and I know it's on the big stage and crowds and TV and a different level of intensity, but there's lots of other trials as well. Every day that you go out on a Joe Schmidt training session, you're being put under pressure, and I just wonder that he hasn't been given his opportunity. Is it because that he hasn't quite delivered the way Joe would have wanted it on the training ground?
We're not there, right, obviously, but for someone like Joe, I think and correct me if I'm wrong here now, I think he's someone that he wants to know what he wants to know what the outcome is. He wants to know what he's going to get from a player. And I think look, we're not there. We're not seeing what's happening day in, day out. We're not seeing how guys are they knowing their job role when they're just doing a walkthrough. Nothing drives Joe mad more than you're just doing a walkthrough of kind of some of the plays and you mess up and you don't know your role. That's not acceptable. So that could be something being factored into it. I mean, I'd also love to see, we're talking to different players, I'd love to see Ty Byrne as well get a start. I don't know where you put him, if you put him in the second row or in the back row. Probably second row is where they're putting him right now. They're the 2 kind of forwards I'd like to see, and maybe Niall Scanlon as well get a go. Because I just think he's earned the right to kind of showcase himself. But you're right, I mean, we don't see what's happening in the gym. We don't see the work they're putting in on the laptops. We don't see how they're recovering. We don't see the stuff on the pitch when they're training. And they're all things that get factored into Joe and the other coaches' kind of decision making.
Would you go along with that Byrne, Scannell, Conan in for, I presume, Klein in the second row, Rory Best and CJ Sander to miss out. Is that basically what we're thinking here?
Yeah, and maybe you could mix it up properly. Maybe you could, if Ryan comes back into the second row with Toner, maybe there's the chance of playing Henderson at 6 as well. He was probably one of the ones that wasn't at his best, but he wasn't shirking. Shirking is the wrong word. He wasn't taking a backward step, so to speak. So he maybe him at 6, maybe Pete across to 7. I don't know. You could mix it up massively and really rattle a few cages, or you could go back and try and give guys a second chance to put things right. I think in the back line, Jack Carty absolutely deserves his first start. I think it was a dress rehearsal for Ross Byrne, and he didn't get the platform, but I don't know if he handled the pressure and the quality of ball like you would hope your potential replacement for Johnny Sexton on a bench to do in a World Cup game against Scotland or against Japan. So I think for me, Jack Carty, when he did come on, even though it was still poor quality ball, that he probably got himself out of trouble a little bit more, and he definitely deserves his opportunity if Ross got his last week. And then you need some of the big leaders back. You need Keith Earls back in there as well. You need Robbie Henshaw back in there, and you want him getting game time. Bundy Aki hasn't had many poor games for Ireland, but that was one of his weaker games, and he'd be absolutely bullying to try and get back straight in the team again and get his game right. But I think those different combinations, the ones that you're looking at starting in the Scotland and Japan game, Earls in there, and the centre combination of Ringrose and Henshaw, it's important that we see that and they get comfortable again with one another, having not played since the end of last season.
On a leadership point of view, the idea of Rory Best perhaps not being the starting hooker anymore could be a realistic possibility. Do you still keep him as captain? Does he still have something to offer as a leader around the camp, even if he's not starting at number 2?
If you take, I think you can be the captain of the squad always, but take Lens for example. When Leo was captain, he didn't always necessarily start. So I think personally, I think you keep him as captain, and then it becomes a discussion around starting or not. But I mean, if you look over his body of work, I think he deserves the right to go again and start at hooker. He's done some he's led the squad over the last 4 years, and they've accomplished things that no other Irish side has. So I mean, I don't think you can question his ability in any sort of regard around that anyway.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt he's on the wane. He's 37 years of age. He's been in the front row of international rugby for over 12 years. I don't know any human being that wouldn't be massively affected by that, the brutality of what he's taken, particularly the way he's played the game as well, and getting himself in, and he's big focus on jackling. But for me, with Rory Best, he doesn't have to be one of the best players on the pitch. He just has to facilitate others to do their best job, and he needs to get his darts right. He needs to scrummage well, and he just needs to hit rucks. He doesn't have to be a ball carrier anymore, because I think that has been his ability to do that has been watered down in recent years. He's lost that little bit of spark in the legs. So just do the simple things very well. If we can get his accuracy at line out time, and we can get our stats much improved from last week, and we can win our set piece at scrum as well, and you can do a job there. His ability to lead and be a cool head at key times is still a great asset to have, and I think he's our go-to guy still. I don't think you change anything this close to a World Cup. The great player that everyone was heralding him as being back in November hasn't vanished. He's had a couple of blips, but he's on his day he can be a world-class operator. So I think you stick with him, particularly because no one else has really put their hand up. Sean Cronin was given his chance. Niall Scannell looked as though he was going to break in, and then had a very, very quiet year for Munster. So Rory is the guy in possession, and his leadership might be a huge component to have when we get to the difficult moments in the World Cup.
I'm not saying this would ever happen to Rory Best, but like as two former captains, is it possible for, say, a bad day to impact your confidence in your own leadership, that you think to yourself, God, I've had a bad day at the office, am I still the possible leader I can be, even though they can be and should be two separate things?
For myself anyway, I think you've definitely got to own it. I mean, as a player, you realise, I mean, if he's assessing that game come, I don't know, Sunday, or probably Sunday at some stage, he's looking at the game on the video on the laptop, and probably disappointed in himself, and he's got to realise, like Brian said, he's kind of going to get his stuff right first. So he'll be focusing on how he can get his game better, be that line-outs, be that job role, defence, hitting rucks, whatever it is, and sorting himself out first there. And the experience that we'll have, he'll know that, look, no player has had nothing but good games. So having a bad game and coming back from that has happened to him before, and he's come back from it as well. So I think having that faith in him and knowing that he's done something like that already, would let me think that he's going to do it again. And I think he should be given the chance to do it again. I think he's coming under heavy criticism, but a little bit unfairly, and it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to what is us losing a warm-up game for the World Cup. It's not the World Cup, and I think we need people like Rory on the field to lead us to what is hopefully a successful World Cup.
Yeah, I don't know if I 100% agree with the reaction. I think when your set piece struggles like it did, someone has to hold their hand up, and there's a multitude of factors. Maybe they were talking about the speed at which they were throwing their lineouts in, letting England set. Yes, you didn't have Devon Toner there. But the difficult thing from a leadership point of view that I would say is that when you're not having a good game yourself, it's very hard to bark orders and change the momentum of a game when it's not going right for you. And you try and get your own house in order first, to then worry about the collective house, and that is probably where he struggled at the weekend, and that's where he just needs to get that aspect right. And we talk about leadership being a vocal component. That's a very small aspect to leadership. Leadership is all about how you play and how you showcase, or push the team forward with your own performance. And if he can get that part right, we can add the important words at key times, but it's really about how he plays. That's how everyone will judge him as a leader or not.
A very negative reaction to last Saturday would be to say 2007 might happen again. Is there any hallmark at all from what you've seen over the last couple of weeks? Anything you've seen in the performance on Saturday that would suggest we might see something similar where they actually get to when it matters in the World Cup and things might not be right?
It's hard to know because you're trying to preempt what might happen next week. I tell you what is really important is the next game. It's not the next two games. For me, the next game is really important because whatever about the result, they have to play well and they need to get their confidence up, because if they don't manage to get their confidence up, that record defeat in Twickenham will live with them a lot longer, and it'll manifest itself and it'll fester. Whereas if they can park that and put in a really big performance and hopefully get a victory from it, I think you're able to rid yourself of the memories of that, and you're able to look positively and look forward. So they have an opportunity. Listen, 07's certainly not hanging over anyone's head. Rory's the only one that was there and has memories of that, so it's not an issue from their perspective. And they'll think the coaching ticket, with the experience that they have, with the record that they've held over the last 2 years, that they can turn this around, and I have every faith that they can do it. But they need to do it quickly, because you don't want it sitting there with them going into the two clutch games against Scotland and Japan first up on the back of no confidence.
Is there a possibility as well, Jamie, that we might actually just see something of a style of play that isn't going to be used in the warm-up games? Because why would you show your hand in the warm-up games? Coming away from the Six Nations, there was this view that Joe Schmidt needs to go away and think about something new. We've seen the box kicking abandoned. We've seen something different off the boot. Is that suggestive that we might actually come into the World Cup with something that other teams haven't seen before?
I think if you look at two games, there's two kind of very different styles at times between the Italy game and the England game. In the Italy game, I think there was a lot, like the forwards were operating most of the time in like a pot of three, coming off 9, tipping passes inside and out to each other and looking for the pass out the back, with runners coming off 10 then. We saw less of that in the England game. I think we saw a lot of one-off carriers, which made it quite easy to defend against. So it'll be really interesting to see what evolution we see. You said like there hasn't been a lot of box kicking. They've kept the ball in play a lot. Maybe they're getting used to trying to force that, because teams are doing that a lot to Ireland. They're not allowing them have the platform that they usually have had in the past. But it's such a fine blend, because I'm sure they've been working on things throughout the summer, in Carton House or in Portugal, but they can't show their whole hand. I mean, even when you get past, the Scotland game, the Japan game, you still got 2 more games in your group. Then you got a quarters, a semi. You know what I mean? You can't show everything straight away. And knowing Joe, I'm sure he has a repertoire of moves that they have banked during the summer, and he's given them game sheets with the moves that they're using for that week, and holding back a lot of information. But then at the same time, a really good thing that Joe's done throughout the years is doing moves that look similar but tweaking them at different times to expose different opportunities in teams. So I'm trying to go a long way around answering your question here. I think I would like to see a lot more of interplay between the forwards and the backs as opposed to one-off runners, a lot more like we saw against Italy. But it's going to be tough against the Welsh side, who get up off the line quite aggressively, close your space down, keep the ball in play a lot, and don't give you that platform to launch off. So if Ireland can move the ball around and don't do that one-off play, I think they'll be quite successful. And I think that's probably the way they're going to start pushing towards.
Great stuff, lads. Just before we wrap up, midway through the warm-up games, where Ireland's going to get to in the World Cup?
I still think that they're going to win their group, and then they have this enormous game against South Africa or New Zealand. My concern was if they did get South Africa, that the power game that we saw against England, they've shown the prototype as to how to go and beat Ireland, and can we deal with that power game? I just have some concerns around that. But I think Ireland will manage to turn it around and certainly be quarter-finalists. They just need their best players firing for that quarter-final, be it against the world champions or against a vastly improved South Africa. So I still think glass half full, and I think we can get to a semi-final, and then all bets are off.
What do you think?
I'm the eternal optimist. I want them to go all the way. I think they can. They'll get out of their group, but once you get into knockout rugby, and you either have New Zealand or South Africa, I mean it's a tough gig. But the squad is probably the best squad that's been assembled. Have shown unbelievable form over the last 2 years leading into this, so they've got the best chance.
Jamie, Brian, thanks a million.
Thank you.